Hello again. This is part of the end time prophecies, and this particular short video is going to basically look at the time for judgment is now. This time Christ is coming as King of Kings, as a lion and not as a lamb. Since mankind and their governments will not relinquish power and authority to God, His true authority, 6,000 years have proven this. He is sending now His Son to take control by force, in order to put down all earthly governments. There is no other way for God's kingdom to come. The rule of mankind is going to violently be taken away by the one Almighty, eternal God. Only a very few believe these things at this time, but over the next several months, millions will come to believe it. Now is the time of transition, my dear friends, when everything is going to begin to change from man's self-rule to God's worldwide rule. And sharing this with your hearts, I think of the many times that I have spoken about this and shared this with others. It's about honoring your heart and surrendering. And yet not many people are willing to listen. Nothing has changed, really. Mankind still goes on, and still persistently remains in denial. Even during the time of Christ, the overwhelming vast majority of people, including rich and poor, educated and uneducated, government officials, religious leaders, and those from all other walks of life, refused to believe that Jesus was the Messiah or a prophet. They did not receive God's own Son. So it is no wonder that all humanity has refused to listen to any of us who are God's prophets. And one reason why even I have been set up by many of my family and exposed on the internet as a... But that is their stuff, and that is the work of evil. Some think that by the very fact that I would make such a statement, that I come sharing God's message from a heart of love. They think that I think highly of myself. I don't. I'm in divine service as you are, and I speak only God's truth, God's love. But we have a job to do, and we must do it with boldness and confidence, and we do so combined with genuine humility before a loving God. Sadly, this sounds assurance is often misread as seen as haughtiness. And what I would say to you, my dear friends, is please surrender your heart today to truth, because the end time prophecies are real. They are real as the nose on my face, and you have the choice, the same choice as I do. The same choice. Yes, you do. God has no pleasure in the suffering of mankind. On the contrary, it grieves God. But God's righteous judgment must now be executed in order for His kingdom to be established at the coming of His Son on May 27th, 2012. Because of God's great mercy, mankind has escaped great worldwide tribulation and suffering for more than 2 years now. But now time has run out. The second reason God chose to intervene and delay the execution of His judgment was because there were people like you and I who prayed, and God heard that prayer. And now, with the events unfolding from Japan and the tsunami, it is true to say that the second trumpet of the angel, as recorded in the book of Revelation, has already been sounded. And this work must be accomplished as written and inspired by the Spirit of God. But who has taken notice of God's mercy and the extension of time that he has given without tribulation. Only his church, no one else. The reason is because no one else believes these truths, and even within his church there are those who come to it mainly from the head, not the heart, who process instead of acknowledging and accepting God's word. So now God's judgment of end-time events must be unleashed, but sadly they've already begun. Since the beginning of this year, the thunders of Revelation have become louder and are now overlapping each other. Severe storms of destruction are not just in the distance any longer, but coming quickly down upon us. These begin harshly upon the United States, first and foremost. The third trumpet is being prepared to sound, and the thunders will be intensified dramatically in this nation and throughout the whole world. And Istanbul, it has been predicted that a tsunami of mega proportions will hit her. But the world is out of control. Man has become grossly disobedient to a loving God, and who has pillaged this earth. No wonder Mother Earth is weeping. Yes, end-time events have already started unfolding before our eyes. Over the past 2 years, the world has chosen to believe it can turn the tide of a worldwide economic crisis that struck us in 2008. Wall Street has willingly deluded itself into believing it can regain all that was lost and continue to move forward in full recovery. They will not recover at this time, and it's different from all others in the past because this is the end time. Instead, a far greater economic crash is about to occur. Most are blind to events reported in the news that should be crying out to them of God's final handwriting on the wall. God has now numbered our days, and our self-rule will be finished. The world has been judged, and the age of man will now end. It is the time for God's rule to be established. The Middle East is in great turmoil. Commodity prices are surging, governments are struggling. Europe is in crisis. China is at a crossroads and is now acting accordingly to preserve herself and become dominant in the world. Food is rapidly becoming more scarce. This all sounds very alarming. It's not meant to be. It's truth. Earthquakes, extremes in weather, destruction of crops, economic turmoil and uncertainty, government uprising, inflation, terrorism, and many other calamities are about to increase manyfold over. We have entered the most sobering period for man's history. Death and destruction is now at our door. You need to make sure that you are getting your spiritual house in a better order. As part of that process, God has called upon people to enter into a one-day fast in the beginning of April. The second day of the month has been set aside in many churches as the target date for that fast, but can certainly be entered into before or after that date. So what is all this saying? It's saying go back to basics, put your house in order, connect with your heart, and reawaken the divine within you. Hold firm to what is true. Read the book of Revelation. The prophecies given to St. John and what he reveals is quite alarming and staggering. But prayer will move mountains. Prayer will delay and defer a lot of the fatalities predicted. And my heart is saying, work with what Mother Mary has guided us to do. Support her loving Son. Let not his death be in vain. Surrender your heart, my brothers and sisters. Surrender your heart to God's love. That's not giving away your power. That's inviting the divine to come in, take up residence, and protect you. Protect you from evil and the impact of the Antichrist. Pax et Bonum.